only mode.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us tonight for our Generation UCAN talk show. We're chatting nutrition for triathlon training and triathlon race day. I'm Varun Sriram. Happy to be joining you guys tonight from Brooklyn, New York. We've got people all over the US and I think people all over the world tuning in tonight. So, for everybody out there, really appreciate you hanging out with me. I know a lot of you have joined us for these before. We're trying to do things a little bit different with these talk shows in the talk show format and really make it all about answering questions. A lot of the other webinars, we may feature a guest. We may try to talk about general, broader health and fitness minded topics, but these are really designed to be very UCAN focused and a tool to help you all answer your questions. And, we'll definitely hear from a lot of UCAN users as well. If you would like to come on live and talk to me and chat with me, shoot us a question in the chat. I am flying solo tonight. Always have a revolving band of co-hosts, but definitely can use the company of the audience to make this interesting. With that being said, want to get things started by talking a little bit about the different UCAN products. And we've launched some newer products that folks may or may not have had a chance to try lately. Two newest ones being the UCAN Hydrate electrolyte drink, which is about a year or so old on the market, and the UCAN snack bars, which we launched in February or March of this year. So let's take a quick look at the UCAN and kind of where the different products fit in. The UCAN Fuel is really the carbohydrate powder that features our super starch carbohydrate. So for any of you new to UCAN, we will get into the science a little bit as we move along, but what's unique about UCAN is the carbohydrate in our product, and we call it super starch. It's basically a slow release carbohydrate that keeps your blood sugar steady. When your blood sugar's steady, your energy is much more even. You don't have to refuel as frequently during exercise, and that's kind of the idea of how UCAN works. It's going to give you that steady and even energy for a long period of time. You don't need to take in as many calories because you're also able to utilize more fat. So with the UCAN Fuel, it's really the super starch plus electrolytes, and that's what we're talking about using every 30 minutes prior to the workout. So the fuel is really your pre-workout snack. I tell people this all the time, but it bears repeating. Even though UCAN is a drink, you don't want to think of it as a traditional sports drink that you sip on. And, I'm so used to saying, even though UCAN is a drink, we do have the UCAN bars now, but primarily the products are powders, but you really are thinking of UCAN more as a food. It's fuel, not a sports drink that you sip on. So with the UCAN Fuel, 30 minutes before, every 60 to 90 minutes during training. People generally find that the amount and the frequency of which they have to refuel with UCAN, it kind of varies based on duration, based on intensity of exercise, and really based on how efficient you are. So if you're somebody that's used to fueling with 300, 400 calories per hour, it may take you a few weeks to adapt to utilizing UCAN and really being able to significantly reduce your caloric intake. With UCAN, we generally find that people are coming in around the 100 to 150 calories per hour range. But as I start going down the calorie per hour road, I really encourage you to kind of throw the traditional notions out the window with UCAN and figure out how it works for you based on self-experimentation. I think a lot of times we get locked into X number of calories per hour based on the traditional recommendations for the sugar-based fuels. But with UCAN, we're really talking about something that works very, very differently. And there's a lot of stuff that we're still learning about the timing and the dosage and what's needed. So treat yourself like a laboratory and kind of, go by a general guideline of a packet or a scoop and a half every 60 to 90 minutes and go from there. Now, the UCAN with protein, it also has the super starch in it. It's got electrolytes. It's got some added protein as well. And the UCAN with protein, it's really pretty versatile. It can be used as a pre-workout snack again. And the idea differentiating the UCAN Fuel versus the UCAN with protein is if you're feeling a little bit hungry prior to your workout, or if you're going on a longer workout where hunger is going to come into play at some time, then people will take the UCAN with protein prior to the workout. It's going to help curb that hunger. It's 13 grams of protein per packet. Not really enough to get you bloated and feeling full, but enough to kind of quiet that stomach hunger. And then certainly for those, half Ironman, Ironman type races. If you're somebody that prefers to get your nutrition in the form of primarily liquid calories, UCAN with protein, even on the bike, is something that a lot of Ironman or half Ironman athletes utilize. And again, the idea is that you're getting the same amount of the slow release carbohydrate that's going to keep your blood sugar and energy steady. You're also getting the added protein to help curb that hunger during the race. Let's talk a little bit about UCAN Hydrate. So this is, our only product without super starch. So when we talk about blood sugar management and steady energy, that kind of doesn't apply for UCAN Hydrate. This is purely an electrolyte replacement. And a couple things that make it unique. Number one being that it was formulated by an Olympic dietitian, by Bob Seebehart, to match the ratio of nutrients you lose when you sweat. So there's 5 electrolytes in the product, and the ratios and the quantities of each electrolyte are the ratios at which most people lose electrolytes when they sweat. Now, another thing that's great about UCAN Hydrate, it's got double the magnesium, 50 milligrams of magnesium per serving, as a lot of electrolyte products out there. So magnesium is an important cofactor to aid in energy production from an electrolyte standpoint. It's also something that a lot of folks are deficient in. So with the UCAN Hydrate and the magnesium in it, that's something else that will really be beneficial to you. And finally, what I really like about this, just from a taste standpoint, is it's completely natural. So no artificial sweeteners. Doesn't kind of have that fake taste when you're having it out in the heat or on the bike. It's really going to be refreshing and something that goes down smooth and easy. That's something, again, that you can sip on. So from a practical standpoint, what's great strategy for triathletes is to treat UCAN, the fuel products with the super starch in them, as a separate bottle from your hydration. So that way, you're taking your fuel at certain intervals every 60 to 90 minutes. You're taking the appropriate dose from your fuel bottle, and then you can have the UCAN Hydrate and just kind of sip on that in a hydration bottle on an as-need basis in between the doses of fuel. Some people, if you are a heavy sweater, they actually, while the UCAN fuel and the UCAN with protein does have sodium and potassium, if you want to add extra electrolytes to it and kind of get it all in one, so you aren't sipping on a lot of extra fluid, some people will add the hydrate to their fuel bottle. That's also fine to do. Finally, the UCAN snack bar. Something that also has the super starch in it. It's also got protein, fiber, and fat to help curb hunger in your stomach. So UCAN snack really can double as a pre-workout, pre-training, snack, or some people will wake up and have it as their breakfast and then have the UCAN fuel or the UCAN with protein 30 minutes prior to their workout and kind of get that double extra dose of super starch in. So it works great that way. It practically speaking, right now, the flavors, the chocolate and the chocolate peanut butter, because they have a chocolate coating and they've got some coconut oil in them, don't hold up very well in the heat. So, I know some folks have tried freezing them, and depending on how soon into the bike you're going to have them, that's worked out all right. From a nutrient standpoint, they're kind of a ideal bar during exercise to help curb hunger, and they're really going to support the steady blood sugar, steady energy principles of all the other UCAN products. So it is a good bar from that standpoint, but practically speaking, it can get a little bit messy. Good news is we will have an uncoated cinnamon bar out, hopefully by early October. That's the timeline right now. So that, while it may not help out for this summer, going into next season is going to be a great option for a lot of folks. For me, I really like using the UCAN snacks really at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon to help keep my blood sugar steady and kind of smooth that hunger over until dinner. So, really just as a snack during the day. Sometimes I'll have it mid-morning if I didn't really have much of a breakfast, so I'm not overeating at lunch. Different ways like that. It's really a bar that's going to support the stabilization of blood sugar. So that gives you a general outline about what the UCAN products are about. We'll get into it a little bit more in terms of specifically using it in training, but let's bring our first guest on the line. I want to bring Jeff Klein on the line to share some of his thoughts and feedback about UCAN. Jeff, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Lauren. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Jeff. So give folks who are listening in a little bit of an idea of who you are as an athlete, what type of training you do, and kind of the what way you've implemented UCAN both with the athletes you coach and for yourself in triathlon training.
Well, I've been training runners and triathletes now for a little over 15 years. I think it was maybe 4 years ago when you guys first approached me about the product. And we tried it on a few of our athletes, and the feedback immediately was okay. As far as me as an athlete, I'm an old guy, but I'm doing an Ironman in my second Ironman in Chattanooga this week in 5 weeks, and then I'm doing Ironman Arizona after that. And I would say across the board, it really doesn't matter what level of athlete you are. We're just finding great results in performance changes from the people who are using this product, and not just in the amount of you know well, actually, in the amount of calories that they have to take in and the extended amount of energy that they're getting out of it. I know a lot of our people in here are in the Ironman Lake Placid group. When I did Lake Placid, I used solely UCAN, and they didn't have the hydrator out then, so I had water and Endurolights at the aid stations, and I did the entire race on 88 calories an hour. Recently, one of our other coaches, Sherry Ann Nelson, just did a 100 miler, and Sherry Ann did about 90 calories an hour on her 100 miler. I just did a 12-hour treadmill. I went run for prostate cancer, 53 miles in 12 hours on about 92 calories an hour. But I've been using the product for a very long time, and so I get a much longer extended energy use in the product. But as you said, most people that we start out with in our team start at that 1 hour to an hour and 15-minute range per serving. And as Lauren said, that extends as you actually change your diet a little bit. If you go to a more fat adaptive diet, you start to burn fat longer, and you start burning more fat for energy, and you'll start to see an extended energy period from the use of UCAN. I have a guy who is running Leadville this weekend who uses UCAN solely on his 100 milers. So we from 100 milers to marathoners to our triathletes, they're all using the products, and they're all just seeing great results.
Jeff, that's fantastic. And one more question for you before I bring on somebody else. How long did you find when you started using UCAN that it took you to adapt? You say now you're getting longer out of it than you did at first. Did it work? Did you feel something the first time you used it, or did it take you a little bit of time to kind of understand how to use it?
Well, it didn't take me a long time to understand how to use it, but it's really interesting. When you guys first got the product in front of me, I sent it out to 4 different level athletes that I have. One was an Ironman athlete who was a 54-minute Ironman swimmer at Wisconsin and was a collegiate swimmer, so a very strong swimmer. I sent it out to an ultra athlete, and I sent it out to one of my girls who was a marathoner, and then I used it myself. I went swimming the first time I used it and felt felt the results the first time I used it. The guy who I gave it to, who was probably my best Ironman swimmer then and now, he said the exact same thing. He said, normally I start to tired about 3,000 yards or so. He said I went through a whole 4,300-yard workout without any fatigue. But in the beginning, for me, it was about, I'd get about an hour 15, hour 20 minutes out of it. And only because I've probably been fat adaptive a little bit longer than most people. A lot of us old folks are, because we didn't have all the, the great goos and gels and bars that, are out on the market today back when we were running. So I found that I need less. I've always needed less calories. But I think it extended for me over a period of about 7 months till I got to that 2 hour point. I can actually take a serving, and I like to do a serving of the protein prior to my workout. And so I can take a serving of the protein prior to a workout, and just recently I tested my levels again. At 2 hours, I feel pretty good. At 2:15, I start to tire. At 2:33, I'm really at that 90% bonk stage, and at 2:45, I'm done. So I can actually sustain about 2 hours now on a serving comfortably.
Jeff, that's fantastic. Appreciate you sharing the history. Thanks for coming on. Great stuff. Thanks so much, Jeff.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Warren.
I want to bring on Dorette next to share some of her experiences. Dorette, how are you doing today?
Hey, great, Lauren. How are you?
I'm doing very well. And Dorette, what was kind of interesting, which I want to get you to weigh in on, is this whole interplay between diet and the effectiveness of UCAN. So certainly want to ask you about that in a moment. But just starting out with what's been your experience with UCAN? How were you introduced to it, and what have you found has worked for you?
Oh, okay. So I was introduced to it same time about 4 years ago. I've been studying to become a registered dietitian. So I'm a member of the Collegiate and Professional Sports Dietitians Association, and it was through that organization that I was introduced to Generation UCAN. There was some conversation and talk amongst the professionals. You've got registered dietitians, PhDs, dietitians with their master's degrees. I mean, it's a really highly organized, highly professional group that it's everything that they do is it's just all scientific based. So, there was a lot of there was inquiry and talk about Generation UCAN, and so my antenna went up, and because I've been an endurance athlete since 2000, and so that I was just very interested because it was something very unique, very different from fueling in the traditional sense of 25, 35 grams of carbohydrate every 45 minutes or so. So that caught my interest, and also because I'm a big fan of Bob Seebahar, so I really was interested to know what he was into. So that's how I was interested, introduced to it.
Both apply.
Yeah.
Fantastic, Gerard. And so, as an athlete, you mentioned your background, or you're studying to be a registered dietitian, and frankly, that's why I wanted you to weigh in on what I'm going to ask you next. But as an athlete, what types of events are you involved with, and how have you used UCAN in your own personal training?
That's a great question because I have had to take off at least a year and a half from, it's, gosh, the pendulum swung completely the opposite direction. But I did run a marathon last year, qualified for Boston. That was my third time qualifying. I've done Ultraman 2010, so that's twice the distance of Ironman over the course of 3 days. My preferred distance is probably I'm going to say Ironman. I have to full Ironman unless I do another Ultraman. It might be that, but so that is my experience as an athlete. I'm also an endurance coach. My husband and I have a company, so we coach athletes together. He has a master's in physiology, or excuse me, kinesiology. So there's a lot of shop talk in our house about metabolism, lots of it.
That's funny. Shop talk about metabolism. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So probably makes for a lot of interesting dinner conversations. In your experience, what have you found with UCAN? How have you used it for your longer brick workouts or your longer rides? What have you done?
I've used it for short and long. So short meaning, and I've experienced this with my athletes as well. Let's say, triathletes in general, we're going to have two workouts a day. Some people might even triple up, but sometimes you can't fit those workouts back to back. Maybe you get one in the morning and maybe one later on in the evening. And by the time that the evening or later afternoon comes by, you've been eating, and a lot of us we work full time. I will be working full time pretty soon, but we work full time. So, we have to juggle the job and eating and then getting that next workout in. And I think that's where Generation UCAN can be really beneficial, is because, you don't want to eat too much, anything too fatty, anything high in protein, anything too dense before you go into a workout. And especially if you had a big lunch or you went on a business lunch, then sometimes if you have that at 1, that's still sitting in your stomach at 3 or 4. And then by the time you go to track at 5 or 6, you're just not feeling good. So, that track workout, or even if it's a power cycle class, maybe that's only an hour to 90 minutes, but that's a great time to use the Generation UCAN Super Starch, because it's very easy to mix. It's very easily digestible. You get the energy you need, and you're not loading up your stomach. So it's great for short, intense, quality workouts, but it's also really beneficial for those longer workouts. I've done a whole Ironman filled off of Generation UCAN. I'd have to go back through my training calendar or log to see how many calories I actually consumed. But I might have had, at the end by the run, maybe one gel, but everything else was Generation UCAN, and is as a super starch in one bottle, or even mixed in a gel flask, so I can, keep up my water bottles available for the hydrator. So just keeping those two completely separate.
Yep, that's an important point. And I'm so happy, Dorette, that you did talk about the shorter workouts, because I think, sometimes as athletes you tend to do this a lot, where those long workouts become a big focus and a big thought, and then that's where all the nutrition planning is going in, and sometimes you might sabotage those shorter workouts either by fueling incorrectly, or not fueling at all, just because like you so accurately mentioned, everyone's got lives and busy schedules and obligations. And I think one of the big things, even for those intense workouts, in addition to the ease on the stomach, is when you have that steady blood sugar, it's really powerful for your brain, because it's really keeping your blood sugar steady is really going to help that drive and that focus. And that's something, I don't know if you personally have experienced it. That's something we've heard from a lot of professionals and dietitians that work with, collegiate or professional athletes, that when their guys are training hard, kind of their focus and their drive is very strong when they're fueling with UCAN.
Right, right. And sometimes when you take a gel of some sort, just that alone, if I have one now, I'm like, ugh, but that still sits in the stomach, it goes into the intestines, and it's just such a, it could be just some, either sits there or it goes in really fast and you get that spike. But the thing with the Generation UCAN, I found, it is that slow, steady release. You don't even know what you've taken it. The only way you know is because you feel really good, but there's no residual effect like, oh man, I shouldn't have had that gel, that's really bombing my workout now. So, and then I guess the last thing I just wanted to share, because our last guest mentioned about being fat adapted, definitely a benefit if there are those athletes that are looking to become more metabolically efficient. That means being able to burn more fatty acids at a higher intensity, and that goes along with your daily nutrition. Your daily nutrition has a lot to do with that. But we also have an athlete that's she's fully ketogenic. It's not necessarily for performance choice, but it is because she has a medical need that requires her to be on a ketogenic diet. So this is actually a perfect fuel for her to have for those, because she does shorter workouts, shorter intense workouts, without compromising coming too far out of ketogenesis.
That's really fascinating. We had a webinar a week ago with Dr. Jeff Volek, who is one of the preeminent carbohydrate researchers, low carbohydrate researchers in the country, and was the former chief scientific officer for Atkins, involved with a lot of the low carbohydrate studies as well, like I mentioned, and so he was talking again about the same thing, where by keeping your blood sugar steady and not creating that insulin response, allowing you to burn fat. There's athletes in ketosis. He did a study with ultra runners that and a few of them that were in ketosis were also using UCAN, and it's pretty amazing that because of that slow release, it can for folks keep them in ketosis. Dorette, I wanted to just one last thing to ask you before I bring the next guest on. So Bob Seebahar, who you mentioned, had said this earlier, but he kind of said that UCAN alone can work well for you, kind of independent of what diet you're on, just by keeping your blood sugar stable. Metabolic efficiency can work very, very well for you in terms of what you're talking about, training the body to better utilize and burn fat at higher intensities as well. And when you combine the two, it can just be, mind blowing. And that's, from the examples that we've heard from you. We had a gentleman, Matt Bach, who won Ironman Maryland last year, an 8:51:19 iron on 94 calories per hour, primarily UCAN. When you work with athletes and the conversation about nutrition and UCAN comes up, do you find that you talk to them about their daily diet, or are you kind of just recommending it the same way, independent of what the diet is?
Actually, both. I think always the first thing somebody wants to know is what should I eat or what should I drink on race day? And my answer is always, 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 well, what do you eat during the middle of the week? Because that's going to affect it just as much. A lot of people want to just like fix it like for race day. But I think that sometimes we have to start with these baby steps. So for some, it depends on the individual. For one person, it might be that they're going to take a look at their daily diet and then fine tune their training nutrition. And for others, they're going to start with their training nutrition by means of what do I eat during training and racing, and then that carries over into their daily nutrition. I find that the latter actually is more prevalent with some of our athletes because they can experience firsthand when they take Generation UCAN, they can experience how effective it is from the moment that they use it. And once they start to understand its benefits and how it's used, then that carries over into, well, how can I change the rest of my diet to improve it? And I'm going to be on them about that anyway. So that, it's going to be both anyway.
No question, no question. Makes a lot of sense. Well, Dorette, thank you
Alrighty.
so much for your time. Thanks for sharing the
Thanks,
feedback. It's great
Lauren.
to have you
All
on.
right.
All right, so let's some great insight from our first two guests, and want to bring a few more folks on to share their experiences. Remember, if you do have a question, you can feel free to send it to me in the questions tab on the GoToWebinar app. I will bring you on if you'd like to chat live. If you'd like to just have us answer the question, no problem there either. So definitely want to make sure anybody with questions, we can get them answered. Let's look at this next chart and talk a little bit about using UCAN on race day. So if you're a Olympic distance triathlete, a half Ironman distance or an Ironman distance, you're likely going to be using UCAN both pre-race as well as during race. But let's start with the sprint. For a lot of people, depending on where you're at, that sprint distance is going to be 1 to 2 hours. So for a sprint triathlon, UCAN really, it makes life easy. 30 minutes prior, you take a serving of UCAN. A packet or a scoop and a half is roughly what we recommend. Now, if you want to just kind of have UCAN as your all-in-one deal, kind of have it as your breakfast as well, I would recommend taking the UCAN with protein. If you want to eat some breakfast, that's perfectly fine too. People ask us, can you combine UCAN with food? Should you do just UCAN? It's kind of something you're going to have to play around with. But generally speaking, what I tell people is that when you're eating breakfast, focus on nutrients that are going to contribute to satiety. So this is protein and fat, because remember, UCAN is a carbohydrate. So you don't need to have, a bagel, a banana, and UCAN, but, something like a piece of toast with some peanut butter on it. People have 2 eggs. People could have a smoothie where a favorite smoothie of many is a packet of UCAN, unsweetened almond milk, maybe half a banana and some peanut butter. So think of what you're eating in that manner. What you're eating is really more to help with satiety. And, if you want to introduce some carbohydrate, just try to keep it balanced. And then for during the race, if again in that 1 to 2 hour range, the great news about UCAN is it really is going to keep your blood sugar and energy steady for that period of time. So folks are pretty much just focusing on hydration during the race. And there's a whole variety of electrolyte products out there that don't contain any sugar or calories. So I'd say gravitate towards one of those, or something that is, if you're going to have something that has sugar in it, try to dilute it, or kind of, I would generally say try to avoid it. For the longer distance triathlons, again, it's the same idea pre-race. You could have your breakfast along with UCAN. You could have the UCAN with protein. Some people, depending on how long for an Ironman they're out there for the swim, they might even double up and have 2 servings of UCAN prior. If you're going to be out there for close to 2 hours in the swim, and if the swim is something that for you is very intense. But at that point, it's really, once you get on the bike, depending on the distance, you really want to time that second dose of UCAN about 60 to 90 minutes into the race. And I'm going to reiterate this time and time again, but the biggest benefit you're going to find with UCAN is training with it. That comes from making your body more efficient standpoint. Many athletes find that with UCAN, using UCAN in their training, they're going to get leaner over time. They're teaching their body to better utilize fat, so they're reliant on less outside carbohydrates. And it's going to teach you kind of the dosing and how much you need to take and how frequently you need to take it. So That's why I sort of give the range of every 60 to 90 minutes on the bike. Now, an important thing, practically speaking, to think about with UCAN is that, with a gel or with something sugar based, it's going to hit you instantly. So when you're starting to feel low, you take it and boom, it kind of kicks in and gives you that energy you need right away. But it's short lived, of course. That's why you're taking it over and over and over again. With UCAN, you want to be a little bit ahead of it, and that's why, again, it's important to implement it in your training. If you know whatever serving of UCAN you're taking pre-race or pre-training is going to last you, let's make up a number, let's say 100 minutes. If you know that's how long that serving is going to last you, you want to take that next serving of UCAN, get that all in you about 80 minutes in. It's going to take, somewhere around 15 to 20 minutes to break down and start releasing into your bloodstream to give you that steady release of glucose. So that's kind of the idea with it, why it's important to practice it. And again, that's really what you're going to do continuously throughout. So depending on the distance, for an Olympic, for example, you'll likely just take one serving of UCAN. For the half Ironman or Ironman, you're going to be taking multiple servings of UCAN. Now, from a timing standpoint, what most people like to do is, have a serving of UCAN as close to the time as they get off the bike as possible. That way, it's going to carry you through the first portion of the run. If it's a half Ironman, for some folks, that's going to carry them through that entire half marathon. During the run, I mean, look, there's for you folks that have done a half iron or an iron, late in the game, it could become kind of anything goes, So some people, if they're feeling good and the UCAN's it's working really well for them, they'll carry UCAN in a flask, and again, 90 minutes into the run, they'll hit that concentrated serving of UCAN, kind of treat it like a gel, and that'll carry them, through for another 90 minutes. And you might do that twice, if you're finishing the marathon somewhere in that 4 to 5 hour time range. But for other people, they say, you know what, once I get to the run, it's kind of anything goes. I might have some of the Coke on the course. Durette did mention that her last Ironman, she had one gel. So, if UCAN can get you through the bike and some of the run without 2,000 calories, 2,500 calories of maltodextrin or simple sugar sitting in your stomach, you're just going to feel so much better. So if you take in, switch over to the simple sugars, in at the run portion of it, I mean, that's fine. You've got to do what works for you, and whether or not you want to carry UCAN, you have to make that determination. So that's really kind of nuts and bolts how we're using it for triathlon. Now, one of the other things that people are going to always ask is, what else can I have with UCAN? What's going to work well with it? What might mess it up? And generally speaking, what you want to try to stay away from is simple sugars or fast-acting carbohydrates. So fast-acting carbohydrate is something like maltodextrin, which you're going to find in virtually every sports nutrition product, from GU, Hammer, Cliff, Power Bar. The primary carbohydrate source in all of those is going to be maltodextrin, and maltodextrin, it's a high glycemic carbohydrate that's designed to give you rapid energy, and it's going to give you that big blood sugar spike. Now remember, with UCAN, the whole idea is to keep your blood sugar stable. So you want to avoid having UCAN plus having regular feedings of simple sugars or maltodextrin, because again, you're kind of putting a lot in your. You'd be better off choosing one approach or the other versus putting things in your system that are going to work against each other. General rule of thumb, if you are going to introduce some sugar, about 4 or 5 grams per hour during exercise. Anecdotally speaking, we've kind of found doesn't mess with UCAN too badly. So for hunger, if there's something like the UCAN snack bar, but from a convenience standpoint, like we talked about right now, because it might melt, having some type of low sugar bar that you're kind of cutting up into pieces and snacking on. That can work well. Something that's worked really well for folks is like the Justin's almond butter packets. And again, the UCAN is taking care of their carbohydrate and energy needs. So they're having the almond butter, which is primarily protein and fat, to help curb hunger. So if you're getting hungry during the Ironman, that you can do that. There's a brand called Pocket Fuel, which I've heard the packaging can be a little bit tricky there. I haven't used it on a bike before, but nutritionally speaking, it's also kind of like a nut butter, kind of a fat gel. If you can tolerate eating nuts, again, that's protein and fat. That's going to help curb that hunger. So those are what you're trying to focus on with UCAN. And I think where people have found success is once they switch over to the simple sugars, then they stay there. So they're not having UCAN then a gel, UCAN then a gel. It's more like I'm going to use UCAN for as long as it works for me, and then I'm going to switch over to something more fast acting. So on that note, let me see if I can bring on Jessica Baxter to share some of her experience with using UCAN during a race. Jessica, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Hey, Jessica, how are you doing today? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing very well. So you, Jessica, have used UCAN successfully during a race. I kind of gave our general guidelines. I'd love to hear specifically what you did during your race with UCAN, and if maybe you could start out just by, talking about what distances you generally train for, and what specifically the race you used it for was.
I train for half Ironmans and fulls, and the last one that I did was Ironman Austria. And it was last June. And what I did was I preloaded with UCAN 30 minutes before my swim, and I just kind of had a water bottle filled with the UCAN, and I chugged it down pretty fast 30 minutes before my wave went off. And then after I got out of the water and got onto my bike, I waited about 30 minutes before I took in another UCAN because I kind of like to let my stomach settle after going through the water. And I just basically take in some salt and water for the first 30 minutes. And then once that 30-minute mark hits, I go into the UCAN and I put it in a flask. And I put a scoop in there, and I take a scoop every hour and a half. Or actually, excuse me, yes, every hour and a half. So like at the 30-minute mark, at the 2-hour mark, at the 3:30, and so on. And then when I hit the run, I'm right before I get off to do the run. The last serving of UCAN that I have is about 30 minutes before I get off the bike. So that way I have some fuel for the first hour of my run. And then I start taking UCAN again at the 60-minute mark of my run. And then I continue for every hour and a half until I finish. And I have it all in flasks. And I'll put one in special needs as backup, or if I don't want to carry all my flasks at once, I'll make sure to stop at special needs and have that there. So I just dump my last flask and grab the new one.
So Jessica, what turned you on? What made you want to try UCAN? Were you unsuccessful with something different? Were you just kind of trying everything out there? What was the impetus to try it?
Well, I've had a lot of nutrition problems over the past 3, 4 years of doing Ironmans. I bonk easily, and I have a lot of sugar drops, spikes, everything you name it. And I couldn't really find anything that stuck with me and did well. I had things off and on that would work just for short periods, but I couldn't find the key that I needed. And so about 6 months ago, I'd used UCAN off and on during those years, and I just kind of rotated different products. And about 6 months ago, a friend of mine turned me on to a course up in Colorado with Bob Seebahar, and I was on metabolic efficiency. And I was like, oh, I'm desperate. I need to try something to get this figured out. And so when I went up there and took the course, got certified, I started mentoring with Bob and really learning about how the body uses fuel and using fat for fuel, and turned on to going specifically to UCAN and becoming more metabolically efficient. It just became a game changer. And I haven't looked back. And now I have my own business with it, and I'm helping others become metabolically efficient. And the number one product I have them go to is UCAN, just because of how it reacts with the body, and it's so good. It's like that IV trickle of nutrition throughout the race, and it's just been amazing. And that's where I started.
Jessica, that's fantastic, and it's great to hear that you kind of have, like you mentioned, tried a whole bunch of things. So I think you're probably aware, with having tried so many different things, of why this works so differently. And so I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Jessica, what she was talking about towards the end there, she kind of transitioned us just into a brief review of what UCAN is and why it is unique. And I think what she said there was very well put, where it kind of just trickles in terms of the carbohydrate. It just is kind of that steady, slow drip of glucose. And so with UCAN, what's unique about it is really the origins and what it was created for. So the carbohydrate, the superstarch in UCAN, was originally developed for our founder's son, Jonah, who you see on the screen. And Jonah has a rare blood sugar disease. It's called glycogen storage disease. So basically, these kids cannot produce glucose to give them energy. Practically speaking, it manifests itself in frequent feedings. Jonah would have to be fed every 90 minutes to 2 hours, 10 to 12 times a day, 3 to 4 times in the middle of the night, or he'd get severely hypoglycemic and have low blood sugar, which for him could result in manifest in life-threatening hypoglycemia or low blood sugar. So Jonah's parents, they basically they spearheaded research looking at all different types of carbohydrates, and they were trying to find a carbohydrate that they could give to Jonah prior to sleeping at night that would release slowly and steadily over time and keep his blood sugar and steady, so he didn't have to wake up to be fed during the night. So that's really where the superstarch came about. And so for 8 years, the top carbohydrate researchers in Europe, they were looking at all different existing carbohydrates, rices, tapioca, barley, wheat, different types of starches, sweet potatoes, you name it. They were looking at everything. And the sole purpose of the research was to find something that would break down extremely slowly over time and maintain steady blood sugar for a long period of time. So with superstarch, really what it is, the starting ingredient is non-GMO cornstarch. It goes through a 40-hour cooking process with just heat and water, no chemicals, no enzymes. So when we talked about maltodextrin, maltodextrin is also a corn derivative, but it's chemically cooked with enzymes and with acid, and with the superstarch, it's heat and water. So it's a food, and really the way it's cooked causes that slow and steady breakdown over time that maintains steady blood sugar. So Jonah now takes 90 grams of the superstarch, 3 packets of UCAN prior to sleeping at night, and it keeps his blood sugar steady for 7 to 8 hours. One of the interesting things sometimes when people hear corn, they normally associate corn with being high glycemic. When I say high glycemic, something that would spike your blood sugar, something that enters your bloodstream rapidly. And with UCAN, again, what's really, really unique about it is the way the carbohydrates cook. That's what causes that slow breakdown. And that cooking technology is what our company has the worldwide patent on. So there truly is nothing else like this. And that's why it's going to be different than just the regular just consuming regular cornstarch. It's going to break down significantly slower, and it's low glycemic. It's got a glycemic index of about 36. So what we wanted to do before launching into sports nutrition was really to test the superstarch against maltodextrin, which is the carbohydrate, like I mentioned, found in the majority of your popular sports nutrition products. And with maltodextrin, again, on the screen, you see a big spike in blood sugar, and about 30 to 40 minutes in, a significant drop in blood sugar. And if you think about it, why do you take a gel every 30 to 45 minutes? It's because you have to raise your blood sugar back up to maintain your energy. But the deal with UCAN is if you could maintain your blood sugar without having to frequently refuel with calories, you simply wouldn't need to keep on taking calories. I think that's something perhaps, especially in the triathlon world, is a big misconception where people are really into thinking they need 300 or 400 calories per hour for a male, maybe around 200 to 250 for a female. And if you can keep your blood sugar stable, you don't simply need to like a lot of people think, I'm burning X, so I need to replace it with X. But remember, with UCAN, by keeping your blood sugar stable, it's allowing you to utilize more of your own body fat for fuel. So that's a big aspect of UCAN, where we always think of calories as what we're putting in our body. But with UCAN, it's both the steady release of carbohydrate that you're getting from the superstarch, and it's also your ability to utilize your own fat because you're not constantly spiking your sugars. When you spike your blood sugar, your body's going to say, use that sugar first. When you're able to keep your blood sugar stable, your body's going to be far more efficient at utilizing fat. So that is, a little bit kind of a basic explanation of UCAN. So I want to, let's see, we got Ryan who has a question for us. I want to see if I'm able to bring him on and have him ask it live. Ryan, how are you doing tonight? Are you with us? All right. Well, doesn't appear Ryan is there, but let me see what he says. He says, I'm doing an Ironman in 5 weeks, been training with UCAN over the past 3+ months. My expected finish is around 12 hours. I have a fairly respectable body fat of 10%. With that said, I feel like during a long training session, I feel a bit low on energy. For example, for a 6-hour ride, I feel low around 5 hours, and I've had about 4 servings. So should I be consuming a little more? Ryan, great question, and absolutely. So I think one of the things to play around with UCAN, at least initially, is if you are feeling low energy later into the ride, perhaps either shortening the frequency of doses or having more at once. So if you're having, I don't know if you're using the scoops or the packets, but let's just say right now you're doing about a scoop every 75 to 90 minutes. You could up that. Scoop is about 80 calories. You could up that and do a packet, which is about 110 calories, and see if that makes a difference. Or you could say, you know what, instead of doing that scoop every 75 to 90 minutes, let me shorten that and do a scoop every hour. And I think like Jeff talked about in the beginning, that the good thing about UCAN, and maybe it's bad for business, but the more you use it, the longer you'll find it lasts. It's going to contribute to your body becoming more efficient at utilizing fat, and it's going to just last you, longer the more and more you train with it. So ideally, you may start using a scoop an hour now, but down the road it may be a scoop every 75 to 90 minutes. Let's see. Question from Michelle. She said, "Would you recommend using UCAN for any workouts under 60 minutes?" So, absolutely, Michelle. And the thing I think which Durrett spoke about for those high intensity workouts is it's convenience. It's if you're going straight from work to the gym and you're working out, kind of that daily workout for people, 45 minutes to an hour. If you go into that workout and don't fuel at all, two things may happen. A, your performance for the workout may suffer, and B, you may find that when you're done working out, because your blood sugar is so low, if you haven't fueled, you're just going to be ravenous. And that's what happens for a lot of folks. They go into that workout, they haven't fueled, and then afterwards is when they really pay for it. We call it trading dollars for dimes, where you say I'm not saying this is specifically what you're thinking, but some folks might feel like, hey, I don't want to take in these extra calories, but then afterwards, because they didn't take in anything, they pay for it. And simply what I'd say is, if you're working out for shorter periods of time, you could just use less UCAN. So I might use, if I'm just going out for a 3 or 4 mile run and I haven't eaten in a while, I feel I want a little something, I might use half a scoop of UCAN, 40 calories or 50 calories of UCAN, and I'll just simply use less. And again, there's that impact of keeping your blood sugar stable on the brain. So for those shorter, more intense workouts, if you're keeping your blood sugar stable, your brain, you're not going to feel that same kind of brain fog. And then when you feel that brain fog, it's very, very tough to train hard. And then finally, having UCAN before a shorter workout versus, say, a granola bar or an energy bar with 15 to 20 grams of sugar. When you do that prior to a workout, you're raising your blood sugar, you're raising your insulin, and your body's more in fat storage mode than fat burning mode. With UCAN, by keeping your blood sugar steady and by keeping insulin low, you're in the metabolic state to burn fat going into your workout, and your blood sugar is also steady, so your energy is going to be steady. Let's see. We got a question from Gene. Can the UCAN protein drink be used as your endurance drink? If not, are there plans to make a chocolate flavored super starch version? Gene, that's a great question. So there definitely are plans, hopefully by early next year, for a plain chocolate super starch with no protein version, just because people love their chocolate. We know that. So you can definitely use the UCAN protein drink mix as your endurance drink. Now, what you do have to play around with for yourself is, if you're going to use it as a during exercise drink. We've certainly had many folks do that with success, but you just need to see whether or not it's going to bother your stomach during a workout. So that is the one thing that, for some folks, protein may or may not bother their stomach during a workout. So just test that out and see. But if you have no issue with protein during the workout, then using the chocolate or vanilla cream UCAN during, absolutely no problem at all. I want to try to bring on one more guest before we sign off for the evening. That is Susan. So let me see if I can bring Susan on. Susan, are you with us?
I'm here. Hi.
Hey, Susan, how are you doing
Can you hear me?
Thank you very much for joining us. So, Susan, I wanted to get Susan, any chance you've got headphones? I've got a little bit of background noise there. I'm going to mute you for just a moment. Let me know in the chat if you've got headphones, and I'll bring you right back on. Sorry about that. So let me see. We have a question from. Got a couple other questions. What is the best? Okay, got it. So Jason wants to know, what is the best day-to-day diet to use maximum metabolic efficiency? Jason, this is truly probably a topic of its own. Could probably be its own webinar. Actually, if you do Google Bob Seebahar UCAN webinar, or if you email me after, we did recently do a webinar with Bob Seebahar that was very, very much focused on metabolic efficiency and the daily nutrition recommendations that Bob has to optimize metabolic efficiency. I'm going to give you the very simple answer, which is the principles of metabolic efficiency are controlling your blood sugar so that your body's able to utilize fat. And so one of the fundamental ideas behind that is, that Bob has several implementation strategies, but really you could look to either a lower carbohydrate diet or really pairing carbohydrate with protein, fiber, and fat. So when you when you don't eat carbohydrates, fast-acting carbs, especially on their own, then you pair them with protein, fiber, and fat, then you're really going to slow the release of carbohydrates and allow them to keep your blood sugar more stable. And then another one of the principles is to really, with every meal, first focus on protein, fiber, and fat, and then kind of not make carbohydrates the primary component of the meal. If I can try to bring Susan back on, I know she'll have good stuff to say on this topic. Susan, are you there with us?
I am. Can you hear me now?
I sure can. Awesome, Susan. Well, you are trained in metabolic efficiency with Bob Seebahar, so perhaps you'd be someone that would be great to weigh in on Jason's question. How do you go about thinking about the daily diet when it comes to metabolic efficiency?
I balance my carbs and my proteins and my fats, and it's kind of a moving target based on what my training is. So we call it a periodization depending on the training. So through my own experimentation, I have figured out how many carb grams, how many fat grams, and how many protein grams I need per day, as well as during my training and my racing.
Very good. And from a UCAN perspective, what intrigued you about UCAN? How did you hear about it, and how have you been using it?
Well, what intrigued me about UCAN was I have done races, I've done marathons where I'd spend 40 minutes in porta potties with GI distress. And in 2013, I trained for my first Ironman. And my coaches said, oh, you need 300 calories an hour, use what's on the course, use the gels, have a GU every 45 minutes. So I had actually hired a nutritionist at that time that said, yeah, you need low protein, very high carbs, and really low fat. So I trained that way, and I raced that way, and I bonked, and I was puffy, and I had bloating, and I had GI issues. Took me a long time to recover, and I figured something has got to be better than this. And someone invited me to a seminar that Bob Seebahar, the name of the night, was putting on. And it just intrigued me that you could actually do these races and feel good and do them on low calories. So I actually started working on my own nutrition through his services, and they introduced me to UCAN. I then did, in 2014, I used UCAN for all of my training, and I did Ironman Boulder and Ironman Arizona, and had tremendous success. And then just a couple of weeks ago, I did Ironman Boulder again, simply on UCAN, on about 115 calories an hour, and I had a 29-minute PR. And, you see people on these Ironman courses bonking and, just falling apart, because of their nutrition. And I mean, I felt amazing. I mean, the biggest problem that I had was I lost one of my bottles of UCAN on the bike. I went over a train track and it just jumped out, and I had already passed special needs that had my emergency backup UCAN. So I had about probably 50 miles left to go on the bike without any nutrition, and it kind of panicked me. So I did grab some of the Gatorade on the course just to have something, and took maybe 2 swigs over that last, 50 miles. And I was very nervous about doing that because I know what the sugar can do. And so that was kind of a bummer, but I did pee on my bike, and then I got out on the run and I was able to get back using my UCAN and just had a great race.
That's fantastic, Susan. And, so practically speaking, how are you carrying it in your bottles? And, even this is something we didn't get to. Sometimes we have these types of questions, but does it settle in your bottle, or just from a practical standpoint, are you picking it up and shaking it before you drink it? Just some feedback on those practical things in terms of using UCAN.
Okay, so what I do, and I learned from trial and error as well, is in my Aero bottle, I put water and hydrate, and I love the hydrate. So I put that there. And then in my 2 rear bottles, cages, I mix up one the night before and I freeze it, and I put for Ironman Boulder, I used 2.5 scoops of UCAN in one bottle, and then used that throughout the first half of the bike. And then the other bottle had just the powder in it. And so at special needs, I was able to fill that bottle with water. And before I do drink it, I do give it a good shake. But, it just takes seconds, so it's not a big deal. On the run, I ended up just putting some UCAN in a throwaway water bottle and doing it that way. I did put some in a flask, and when I had it in transition 2 for the run, but the volunteer who was trying to put water in my flask because I had not pre-mixed it, she ended up with most of it all over her. So, and I didn't pre-mix it simply because we had to drop it off the day before, and those bags were sitting out on a track in 90-degree weather at the altitude of Boulder from 10 a.m. Saturday until I got on my run Sunday afternoon. So I was a little leery of leaving it, in the heat and altitude like that mixed up. So I just kind of mixed it on the fly during the run.
Good stuff, Susan. That's I think great, very helpful. And last question for you. We had a gentleman, I'm forgetting his name, but or sorry, not a gentleman, Michelle, asking about using UCAN for shorter workouts. In your training, what types of workouts are you using UCAN for? Are you using it for your shorter training and your longer training, or are you relying on it more for your longer training? How do you think about it?
I use it for everything. I use it if I'm going to go do a swim. I'll use it 30 minutes before the swim. If I'm doing a brick, I'll use the protein before the swim, and then drink some, on the bike. So I I use it for recovery too. And I love the bars. I absolutely love the bars. If I'm hungry in the afternoon, I'll eat a bar. The chocolate does melt, so I just lick the paper. That's not a big deal to me, but I'm looking forward to the cinnamon bars too. Those will be good to have.
Absolutely. I've licked a lot of paper on the road, carrying bars in my car and in the heat of Texas or wherever I am. So I'm with you on that. Susan,
exactly.
Thanks so much for coming on. So sorry I didn't give you the heads up on the headphones, but really
That's
appreciate
okay.
you coming on and sharing your feedback.
My
So with that, we wrap it up for tonight, but really want to thank our guests, Jeff, Dorette, Susan, Jessica. Really valuable information. Want to thank everybody that asked questions tonight, everybody that joined us. Stay tuned. You will be getting a full recording of this over the next hour. You'll also get a special discount as a thank you for joining us tonight. So check for that in your email in the next hour. And if you have any questions, you all will be getting the email from me. So feel free to reach out. Feel free to continue the conversation. But again, really want to thank our guests. Prevented me from boring you all for an hour. Couldn't have done it without them, and really, really good information. I'm Varun Sriram. Thank you guys so much for joining our UCAN talk show. See you next time.